Thank you, John. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And magandang umaga, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, magandang gabi sa lahat ng mga Pilipino. Saan man kayong panig ng mundo naroon, sapagkat ang Talakayan 3K Online ay napapanood sa YouTube, Facebook at talakayan3k.live. And today, we're very, very lucky. We're very, very fortunate to have as a panelist Undersecretary Nepo Malaluan of the Department of Education. And everybody knows very well that DepEd was, our education system was mostly one of the most affected sector dito sa pandemyang ito because the pandemic is unprecedented. So there are a lot of changes. We have been adjusting to a new normal. And since sabi ko nga wala for so many, I think the last time that we had a situation like was in the 18th century, the plague, that matagal na yon, 1918 I mean. But so I would not be surprised na there should be a lot of adjustments that we have to take. So ngayon ang DepEd, ang education system natin is one sector na that really took the brunt of the pandemic. So and we'll hear it from Undersecretary Malaluan himself kung ano ba ang naging response ng DepEd on these things. So sir, Undersecretary, uh, please can you start your statements and probably you can tell us what what was the Philippine education system's biggest challenge in 2020 and how did it affect its programs performance targets because of the outbreak of the pandemic?
Well, you are correct that the itong COVID-19 is a disaster that is like no other. And the reason for that is, as you know, the management of the COVID-19 includes the requirement for us to distance ourselves physically from
Mm-hmm.
one another, and even asking us to stay home and sometimes quarantining, not just individuals, but entire communities, provinces, regions, and even countries. And as you know, ang education is traditionally conducted as a
Mm-hmm.
very social and physically present process inside the classroom. But
Mm-hmm.
since the pandemic, and especially with the special concern by the president for children, and not
Mm-hmm.
allowing them to come out of the homes for all types of activities, including the schools, then you are correct that the education sector is one of the most severely affected. And so, at that time, in February, almost a year ago from now, the first adjustment that we had to make was to complete the last year's school year 2019 to 2020, and it was good that it happened towards the very tail end of the last school
Mm-hmm.
year. But then the bigger challenge is, what do we do with the school year 2020 to 2021? And
Okay.
the choice is, do we stop education altogether, or do we strive to deliver education services with various adjustments? And the choice of the department is to develop what we call the learning continuity plan. We might have been one of the first government agencies that put together a continuity plan, and that is what is being implemented now. Of course, nagkaroon ng delay or deferment in the start of the classes. Traditionally, it's the first Monday of June, but we had
Mm-hmm.
to defer it to October 5 in light of the adjustments that we have to make. And the adjustments were quite enormous. Starting with the adjustments in the curriculum, we had to streamline the curriculum to the
Mm-hmm.
most essential learning competencies.
Okay.
We had to adjust our delivery modalities. As you know, it is various, we call it now blended, although blended traditionally means including face to face and various distance
Mm-hmm.
learning modalities. But in light of the prohibition for us to allow our kids to school, then it has been totally distance learning modalities that we had to implement. We had to do the training of teachers, and we had to produce new learning resources. So you can imagine the kinds of adjustment that we had to make in terms of our resources, budget, uh, and it is a whole transformation. But probably just a last note before I open to your next question is that we should not lose sight, even as we address the present situation, the challenges of COVID-19, the longer term horizon and challenges of the education sector. One is the secretary, even before the pandemic, has already flagged as a key challenge for the education sector, the matter of quality of basic education. And so we're addressing that strategically. And second, the challenge that, as has been brought about by COVID, is the challenge of transforming the education sector to the new normal that will not go back even after we are able to complete or totally contain COVID 19. The education transformation has been woken up to the need for transportation transformation in learning delivery, curriculum, and so on. And so we're also addressing that. The use of technology, of course. So malaki ang it is both a challenge and an opportunity for transformation at this stage.
Okay. Point of clarification lang, sir. You mentioned earlier
Mm.
that we're still on the distance learning. So it's not really true when we hear news about some schools, private schools, opening up the face-to-face classes. I mean, am I correct
No.
on that, sir?
Yes, that you are correct. We are on pure distance learning. Most of the private schools are able to do distance learning on a online modality. Uh, and that probably explains partly why the reduction in the enrollment in the private school has been higher than the public schools. In the public schools, because of the varying conditions of our learners and households, the capacity
Mm-hmm.
for, let's say, the online modality, we have been compelled to offer distance learning modalities across various platforms, including the provision of printed modules or self-learning modules, as we call it. And so we had to develop those self-learning modules, print them, and now it is being delivered or picked up by the parents from the schools, and the activity sheets are delivered back. So while not face to face, it is not purely online. One misconception by some of the public, but I think hindi na yan misconception yan, because as much as 50% of our population have a learner in the basic
Mm-hmm.
education. So they have seen how it is being conducted, and that includes not just a digital platform, but also the traditional printed platform. And so our parents are, if they have children in public schools, are very familiar already of the system, where they have to go to school to pick up these modules, printed
Mm-hmm.
modules, and either depending on the system of the schools, it's towards the weekend, or sometimes every 2 weeks, they have to return activity sheets that have been accomplished by their children who are enrolled.
John, do you have any
Uh,
question for
uh,
USEC? For the USEC?
yeah, just a follow up on that. Do they still use books now, or
What's
everything's
that?
printed? Do you still books, or
Yes.
do they use the printed material?
The textbooks are still used, and they have also been, in other words, depending on the ratio of the school to of students to book ratio, they are also provided to the learners, like
Mm.
the traditional time. But the difference only is that the textbooks are meant to be a a learning resource that is assisted by the teacher in a classroom setting.
In a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but in this distance learning modality, we have to supplement the textbook or not really fully substitute, but we have to provide another learning resource that provides guidance to the learners in the material itself, and that's where
Mhm.
the self-learning modules come in. In other words, it is a guided learning resource that has both the content and the guidance for self-learning
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
the students. Of course, that might not be. In other words, the challenge here is the skill of the learners, which are still magkakaiba pa yan, on their skill for self-directed learning. So that most of the time, we also need the assistance of the parents
Yeah.
uh, to complement the guidance of the learners in communication or in coordination with the advisor teachers of the
Yeah.
students. So talagang bagong pamamaraan ito at lahat tayo ay nag-a-adjust, pati ang ating mga magulang,
Mm-hmm.
mga kapatid ng mga bata. But I think as of this time, that has already relaxed a bit
Yeah.
uh, in the adjustment process.
But
Right. Oh.
but sir, how do you validate if the answers really to the learning modules, the what you call that, is not really mostly the initiative of the parents? How do you validate that?
Well, of course, we are there. There is a function in self-learning that there is a commitment of the students themselves to
Mm-hmm.
and the household in a learning process. Alam nyo, ang education system ay nagbabago din, especially now that itong access to knowledge and information ay readily accessible na. So it is not
Yeah,
anymore the
yeah.
traditional, you have to memorize this, etc. Learning has also changed profoundly. And so there is of course, we have to expect such a commitment also from the learners and students, plus the constant communication between the teacher and the parents and the students themselves. Usually, they have group chats at minsan ay kung may capacity ay nakakapag-blend naman tayo ng synchronous online,
Mm-hmm,
although
mm-hmm, mm, yeah,
not fully. So even our assessment methodologies, in fact, we had to issue an interim assessment guideline. Kasama
okay.
dito yung portfolio, for example, ng mga estudyante nung kanilang mga outputs, activity
Mm-hmm.
sheets. So there are changes that are happening also in the manner by which we address the learning outcomes and the process of learning of the students. Of course, you can expect that this will not be a perfect system, and so there
Yeah,
will
yeah,
always be
yeah,
uh, a
Continuous
gaps that
improvement.
we will
Yeah.
have to be addressing. But as I mentioned, kung hindi po natin ito ginawa, we
yeah.
would have missed the boat of having a hands-on experience in the uh, major changes that education systems will take on. For example, Singapore, the Minister of Singapore, I was in a conference where they were also present, has already declared that even after COVID, they will be into blended learning as the main
Mm-hmm,
modality already of education. And I
mm-hmm,
think even the Philippines will have to be going that route. As you mentioned, even in work, uh, and in work situations, things will change already how we do things, given
mm-hmm.
our exposure now and having been compelled to use technology as a platform, not just for communication, but for doing a work processes. And in this case, learning processes as well.
So, but
Right.
anyway, sir, how ready are we on the blended learning? How much percent of our teachers are ready? I mean, they already have gadgets and has access to the internet. And how much percent of it are being done through the learning modules that you provide to the teachers? Do you have an idea? Do we have
Uh,
a ballpark there?
yeah. We actually are monitoring the data. I don't have it with me right now in terms of the percentages of the
Yeah.
learners that are predominantly on printed modules and on online.
Mm-mm.
And a big portion of our learners in the public schools are really in the printed modules. And the secretary has actually directed that we should consciously increase the percentage or proportion of those that are on online learning, also to be able to save on paper,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
for the production. And we have received a lot of support from local government units, and that's why NCR, for example, is one of the regions that has a relatively higher proportion of those that are into the online delivery modality. As you might recall, some of our LGUs have invested quite heavily in
Mm-hmm.
supplementing the DepEd resources for the provision of tablets, for example. I mean,
Yeah.
virtually all of the NCR cities have provided tablets to students. So in these areas ay mas malaki or mas tumataas yung paggamit nitong online
Mm-hmm.
delivery modality. And I think over time we should shift there. We also have some initiatives, although in a much smaller scale, of introducing what we call a local area network. So even if
Oh, nakalan. Mm.
uh, they are offline in a remote school,
Mm.
basta may contiguous community within a
Mm-hmm.
certain radius, we are
Mm.
able to use a digital platform but offline in a local area network. And in fact, we have worked out a grant for this purpose with the intercession also of our Department of Finance for ADB to provide a grant and really deepen our
Mm.
uh, use of such a platform, including the improvements of the content for such. So this is what I'm saying, that while we look at the challenges of this pandemic and the limitations that we have to face, we are also at the same time compelled to use this as an opportunity for transformation.
So,
Right.
but let me just ask that
Then
the
follow up
you.
lang ako dun sa
Oh, sige,
sa
sige,
sinabi
sige,
ni
sige.
Clark. What
Yeah.
about sa mga remote areas talaga na talagang hirap for internet? Is there, like for example, I'm just thinking if FM transmission is being used as a medium, like
Uh,
radio.
Yeah, meron tayong areas na may radio-based instruction, but it is still relatively small. We again the data is not with me, but we also even had a uh, aside from our reporting internally in our basic education information system, we also included this uh, in a specific question in the last round of the Pulse Asia survey on
Mm.
the different modalities that are being used. In terms of utilization of modalities, the highest in the public education system, as I mentioned, are the printed modules, and then secondly are uh, an element of online learning with a higher degree of use in the highly urbanized areas, particularly NCR, and then a very small proportion of the radio and educational television. We have regions that have a local, aside from our agreement with IBC 13, which, as you know, also still have a limited network coverage or reach, we do have partnerships on the ground with local radio stations and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes cable television. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, if it's cable television, uh, that is very dependent on subscription by the household. So uh, the reality is that the public school system is very dependent right now still on the printed modules.
Right. So that's a
So
lot of printing, sir.
That's a lot of
For
printing.
now, pero ang direction is towards paperless, yung mga kaya yung tablet you mentioned earlier.
Yes,
so
but how quick we can cover all, plus the matter of the connectivity, that's an issue. For our teachers, we are about to procure a for both their learning needs or teaching needs, well as for their professional development trainings, uh, a parang load for connectivity and SMS and uh, data and
Mm.
SMS and calls, a support for what we know is a shift into this form of delivering instruction and also receiving training on their part.
Yes. As I
so
can just imagine, sir, that you could probably have the tablets delivered preloaded with all the materials needed by the student.
Yes, that is correct. They can be preloaded with such data so that they can use it even offline,
Offline. Yes,
but
yes.
hindi na digital format na rather than printed modules. And so you can
Correct.
imagine the savings that we have
Yes.
uh, if that is the case. And even in areas where connectivity is a problem, there are for local area networks transmitters that costs about 50,000 and can serve about 200 or so learners. So we are also rolling that out on a very limited basis as part of the piloting and seeing what arrangements can work best.
Yeah.
Also in preparation for the transformation for the future.
Right.
sir,
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
will the shift from the traditional face-to-face learning to blended learning have an impact on the competency level of the students that we have? And if
Uh,
ever, how, what what percent have you factored in determining its impact on the competency level of students? The shift.
the you know the impact will be differentiated. As I mentioned, you can imagine that there are students that have lesser facility for self learning skills, and they will be the ones that will
Mhm.
be left behind. On the other hand, there are those that can have a quick facility. In fact, for this more ibig sabihin, the more proficient students, baka yung ating mga activity sheets will be uh, sometimes instead of finishing them in 1 week, they can finish quite quickly. And so,
Mm.
but
Advanced. Mm.
yes, more advanced. But come to think of it, this is the same situation even in classroom setting. Meron ding talagang mga estudyante na mas nahuhuli at saka mas na nag-advance. Ang isang one thing that has been rediscovered in this situation is the role of the household in the learning process of
Mhm.
children. For quite some time, the households uh, have grown quite reliant on the public school systems for the learning process of their children, and have really withdrawn much uh, of uh, of responsibility for the learning process. When in fact, this is actually a mutual or a joint
Yeah.
responsibility between the household and the public school system. And I think this is one facet that we have seen a greater uh, involvement again of the households in the learning process of the children. And I think we need to be able to harness this into the future of strengthening that co-responsibility. But you are correct that there will be what others term as learning loss for
Mm-hmm.
those that will be less able to cope.
Yeah.
And so we have to have ready remedial measures when things normalize and be able to assess properly. But it will be difficult really to expect the education system to have the answer for everything at this time. I think everyone
Mm-hmm.
are coping. Even in the economy, as you can see, with the the adjustments that have to be made are enormous, and so you can expect the same for the education system. But
Yeah.
I believe very firmly, and the Secretary Briones believes very firmly that we really made the right choice of
Mm-hmm.
insisting and not backing down with our decision to ensure learning continuity even in this time of pandemic and make certain adjustments. We are now focused on how to reintroduce some level of face to face under in the context of a vaccine, and so we're also consulting expert opinion because as you can see, the health aspect is not a traditional competency or expertise of the Department of Education. So invariably, we have to consult outside experts for the health aspect of this, and we are doing that right now. Um, in order to prepare for a transition back to reintroducing face-to-face classes, which are still or which is still very important at this time. In fact, we have a a hierarchy of the in terms of prioritization of where face-to-face learning will be most needed, and one of them is in those instances where the learners are challenged uh,
Mm-hmm.
with uh, you know ability to cope on a self-learning basis and with limited support in the household. So
Yeah.
yung
Mm-hmm.
mga yan ang kailangang i-prioritize natin for the reintroduction of face-to-face so that the teachers can have a better opportunity to guide the students that are left behind. And we are not making any fudging of that because that's a reality at talagang
Mm-hmm.
may na
Yeah.
maiiwan.
Yes,
So
what comes
anyway.
to mind, sir, is is special education. Paano kaya yun? Kasi siyempre kailangan talaga yung
Uh,
hands-on diyan, eh.
uh, yung special education what I know is that some of the learning resources that they have, even in the context of the prior to the pandemic, are still what are being
Mhm.
used. And what is difficult there is that the teachers we are not able to provide the teachers face to face. So really, in those instances, the household will have to take the uh, quite a big responsibility because they're the ones that might have the greater challenge for self learning.
Mm.
So dun talaga ay either we there are those that we are not able to really continue with the normal education. I have to check with our planning dito sa mga learners with disabilities. But my presumption is that there might have been in other words, with respect to the rate of employment, of enrollment, there would have been a bigger proportion of dropout. But just by the way, just to give you an update on the how much were enrolled in this school year.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mhm.
right now, ang ating enrollment, and this is the more definitive data because this already comes from our learner information system. Uh, in the public schools, in formal education, we have enrolled 22.1 million
Okay.
learners, and that's we have reached 98% of our enrollment of last year. So uh,
Oh,
it's the private schools which has suffered more considerable reduction. Our enrollment in the private school is at 3.2 million, down from 4.3 million from last year, and that's
mm,
75%. So dito kasi nagkaroon ng closure, but part o may mga private schools na nagsuspend ng kanilang
mm.
operation for this year. But we have also monitored about 500,000 or so that have transferred from private to public
to
schools.
public.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kasi
So,
online naman eh. So,
so
bakit? Minsan, yung cost
anyway,
effectiveness.
sir, I
yes,
agree with you. We agree with you in your thinking, and in your what you said earlier, that this being an unprecedented health concern, global health concern, na talagang we really need to do a lot of adjustments. What is good with DepEd is it's sensitive to issues about the learning, the education system. So in the preparation of the learning modules, the printed, I
mm,
mean, how many stages does it go through in the process of evaluation, review, and check?
yeah, yeah.
Because no, because entirely with what you explained, education will be dependent mostly on the learning modules that will be given to to the households.
Yeah,
So,
yes, that's correct. What we did, we utilized the period na defer uh, yung school year for the development of these modules. And the Department of Education uh, is not totally without experience with the self-learning modules, because even before the pandemic, we already have a program called alternative delivery modes. These are
okay, okay.
for students in remote uh, areas na nahihirapan pumunta physically in
Mm-mm,
school.
mm-mm, mm-mm,
And also this is an intervention. We still have areas in some provinces where some learners are into seasonal work, and we have to do interventions like this, and those that are at risk of dropping out. So we have a program called alternative delivery modes, where we have already been producing these self-learning modules in the past, but what we had to do was to expand the scale of production of this, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we had to reduce the learning competencies to what we call the most essential learning competencies, just for us to be able to cope
Mhm.
with the requirement of producing this. So we mobilized master teachers and those that have had training in the past for these modules. For the providing these modules, we assigned per region what modules they will produce, and there is a quality assurance system that is happening at the central office level through our Bureau of Learning Resources. The problem there is that hindi yan natapos lahat, so that there are certain learning competencies that were decentralized, so naging kulang yung stages for quality assurance, at
mm-hmm,
dyan may
mm-hmm,
mga lumabas na yung mga lumalabas at the start, that may mga errors uh, that those that are ours, we acknowledge, and
mm-hmm.
we rectify them, and then we also tighten the quality assurance
Yeah,
mechanism.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Another adjustment that we did is now for the third and fourth quarter modules, because we are producing this on a rolling basis
yeah.
uh, per quarter. And for the third and fourth quarters of this school year, we are outsourcing the development and production of the self-learning modules to the publishing industry, to the textbook publishing industry. So we have already issued a call for the submission of prototypes. Kasi itong ating mga private uh, industry publishers also prepared these modules, targeting as their market
The private.
the the private schools.
Mm.
So now the latest update that I got from our Bureau of Learning Resources is that There have been as many as 20 or so publishers that have responded to our call for the submission of their prototypes for the third quarter, and these are being evaluated. So that reduces the burden to the Department of Education to ourselves be developing these modules themselves and being able to outsource this. So this is another adjustment that we are able to do. You're correct, kanina, in your observation that there are refinements that are being done along the way. In other words, this is a very this is a moving program that has
Mm-hmm.
to address challenges and good practices as they surface along the way.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's continuous improvement, bale.
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
but the Department of Education does it have specific guidelines to be followed by both private and
Oh
public
yes.
schools in terms of the development of learning materials? Because as you were saying earlier, that the publishing companies are developing their own modules. Is that
Y-
am I correct?
Yes, that is first defined by our what we issued, which has been publicly published, is the most essential learning competency. So that's the baseline,
Uh
and
huh.
then there's a typical specification of the content, the various components. But
Yes. Yes.
we made some flexibility on the organization of those components to allow you know sometimes the private yung sa Department of Education medyo fixed
Yeah.
yung prototype, pero now that we are opening it, we have introduced
Mm-hmm.
some flexibility into how the self-learning modules are organized, to take advantage also of the different approaches by the private industry, which are basta ang importante ay it covers uh, a large proportion of the required most essential learning competencies for a certain uh, period.
Okay.
In this case, by quarter ang ating reckoning of these essential learning competencies.
But will
So,
the
pero all
depend?
of this
But
po, sir, tanong ko lang,
uh,
follow up dun sa inyo. All of this from the private sector are have to be approved by DepEd.
Yes,
Yes.
what
yeah.
we just issued the guideline for the evaluation of these prototypes, and that is what is happening now. So as soon as you are pre-approved in this evaluation, then you will go to the process now of procurement, where it will be the price that they will have to compete for. Pero yung content has already been pre-evaluated as
Mm-hmm.
passing
Okay.
our
Mm-hmm.
requirements. So that's the system that we have adopted for this third and fourth quarter, and we hope that we will be able to, as I mentioned, have a responsive uh, feedback and
Mm-hmm.
participation from the private industry. And in so doing, we are able also to relieve the burden of our master teachers and
Mm-hmm.
teachers
Opo.
on the ground, to be the one having to draft itong mga
Yeah. Mm.
self-learning modules na ito.
So
And
in the
nationwide po ang rollout nito. Sorry po.
Yes, nationwide ang rollout, because we have make this available across the country. Uh, and even in the survey that we conducted, at yung pinasama namin sa Pulse Asia, ay talagang namang sinasabi ng mga households that they have received this self-learning modules as part of this school year. Ang sana nga lang ay mabawasan itong degree of dependence on the printed modules and probably shift
Mm.
to the digital format.
Yes.
Even the same even the same modules kasi can have both a printed and digital format. So we hope we can increase the proportion uh, of availability or distribution through the digital format, so that we can save on the printing cost
At saka
and the
speed po,
paper.
speed of delivery.
Oh, that's correct. The speed of delivery, because mas madali talaga kahit you can download it. And in fact, we have the DepEd Commons. Uh, Ito yung ating online repository of these learning resources, na whitelisted ito. When we say whitelisted,
You can use
they
it.
have they are provided yung data nito basta galing doon na free of charge kung doon ka magda-download. So you are correct that it also saves on the time, because it can be delivered through the online platform.
Sir, I have yet to see a copy of your learning module, but anyway, just for curiosity or for clarification, is there a portion in the printed learning module where it parental involvement, parents are involved in the learning process?
Well, it's meant to be addressed principally uh, to the learner, addressed to the learner in the guide. You're correct there that uh, it can be designed to include a guide to parents as well, but as it is presently organized, I'm just not sure kung sa early grades ay meron, because of course for kindergarten to grades 1, 2, and 3, you can almost not expect the learners to have the capacity yet for self-learning.
Mm.
So I presume there will be parents guide, but we do uh, you know as part of our interventions, the teachers have to communicate with the parents also, uh, in the instructional supervision of the children. But whether we have a ready material for distribution, or whether it is integrated, I believe that in the self-learning modules, it is mainly addressed to the learners themselves.
So because
So
at this,
that's one improvement that we can
yeah,
integrate,
yeah.
and I can
Yeah.
check that in our
because
meeting.
because because at this point we can only take everything at face value, whatever the student says that I did this all by myself, we can only take it at face value. But the reality is there could be some instances, or in fact many instances, wherein it's the parents who helped provide the
Mhm.
answers to questions. So
Correct. And
perhaps
we can
perhaps
also have a portal for the educational portal where there's a student login and there's a parent login, so the teacher can directly address students. They can
that
also address the parents.
that's the advantage dyan dun sa blended nila if you do the internet, because there will be an instant checking mechanism. Malalaman mo kung you can talk immediately, discuss with the parent kung paano ito nangyari. But
Correct. Oh.
in the printed, wala. We can only take things at face value.
So
On
the
the internet, online, pwedeng yan sinasabi ni John Sir na merong student, may parental involvement, merong teacher. Interaction ng tatlo.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
kaya nga
yeah,
lang
yeah. That's the advantage. You're correct. Na yung synchronous kind of learning. In fact, the teachers can check orally,
mhm.
uh, in a simultaneous interaction with the students themselves. So that's again one of the limitations, but we have to take into consideration that if you insist on pure online distance learning, the ang laking bahagi ng ating public schools ang hindi
Yeah.
makakaagapay dyan ang ating mga mag-aaral. And so we had to introduce this, and as I mentioned, introduce also certain modifications in our assessment of the learning process. May adjustments naman doon in order to check, but as you mentioned, there's a big part that is taken at face value. Uh, um, And so you can almost imagine that
Mhm.
there are those that are more conscientious and responsible, and there are those that would want to, uh, you know, short circuit this process. So yun ang mga ibig sabihin, that's where we can expect what has been termed nga by others as learning loss,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
we have to do remediation along the way, and also validation
Mm.
along the way. Yung validation ay nahirapan din kami dyan dahil in fact even our national achievement tests that we conduct ay hindi natin ma-administer ngayon dahil wala pa rin tayong capacity for
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
computer-based assessments. So they have to congregate physically
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
some place. Kung i-take home mo naman, ay di it will be the same situation
Kasi
as you
second
mentioned.
Oo.
one.
Pareho pa rin.
Grade
So
ni tatay, grade ni nanay.
so those are things that we are there are things that we are not able to address immediately, but there will be an opportunity to address that also
Mhm.
uh, in the process. But you also have to look at this in terms of what would have been the alternative. Can you imagine if ito halos 10 buwan na tayo na yung
Yeah,
mga
yeah.
bata ay talagang walang
Stay walang ginawa, no?
educational activity.
Puro
Bukod sa
puro
na-setback
laro
sila,
lang.
hindi, tsaka ma-setbacks talaga sila ng isang taon. And I've also
Mhm.
Oo.
spoken to parents who have said that they are thankful that they have to make certain adjustments, but they are thankful that we did not stop the
Mhm.
education, and
Walang
you
walang
can
gap.
walang gap, and you can see the level of participation overall. uh, yung combined public and private natin ay 93% tayo of last year's
Well,
enrollment levels. Oh,
negligible. It's a
so
negligible figure.
Mhm.
kaya nga, ibig sabihin, even if there were those that were asking for uh, what they would call an academic freeze or things like that, in the end, the parents supported learning continuity as shown by
Mm, mm, mm.
the enrollment. Ang issue na lang ngayon is when can we resume
Yes, face to
face-to-face
face, traditional.
learning. And yun ang ating pinag-aaralan ng mabuti ngayon dahil dun sa naging desisyon ng Pangulo, at si Secretary Briones naman has made actually already three presentations to the President uh, uh, to reintroduce face-to-face under very stringent conditions. The latest was in December, that was approved by the President for us to do the dry run or pilot implementation under very stringent conditions in certain areas. But when the 19 UK variant came into the picture,
Yeah.
uh, over the break, the president made the decision to recall his earlier approval.
Mhm.
Mm.
Ang tinitingnan natin ngayon is kahit naman magkakaroon ng availability ang vaccine, ay kailangan pa rin nating balangkasin yung roadmap to return to school. So yun ang ginagawa ngayon ng Department of Education, and we are consulting experts not only from the DOH, but also we have requested for expert inputs from institutions through the UNICEF, itong ating World Health Organization, also to provide input uh, on our roadmap to the reintroduction of
Ah,
face-to-face in the even in the context of availability of vaccines.
I'm just curious, sir. I'm just curious. How could the broadcast, the radio, TV help in the learning continuity program? Kasi it's unlike printed learning modules that silang sasagot. Sa online, nandyan sila. But if part of the blended learning, you use the broadcast media like radio, TV. So how can they
Uh, well,
interact?
you can check, meron kaming sa YouTube channel, you can access yung ating DepEd TV. The teachers, we trained what we call teacher broadcasters. And the self-learning modules that are in printed format are
Ah,
transformed in
okay.
are
Mm.
transformed into a script. And so, kung nanonood kayo ng mga TV programs dati
Mm, mm,
na
mm, mm, mm.
educational TV, where there are sometimes there are children, but often there is parang a kuya, in this case a teacher, that of course walang direct feedback, but as though they are talking to
Mhm,
One way
mhm.
learners,
lang, one way.
one
So
way,
sina
one way.
Mm.
so in other words, they do not necessarily have kailangan nila yung printed na learning module.
But
Meron
most
dapat
of
sila.
meron silang activity
May
sheets.
hawak.
Activity
May
sheets. Oh,
hawak
okay.
silang activity sheets.
Okay.
At yun din ang sinasubmit nila.
Parang yung
Ah,
mga online
Mm.
training, you download the training materials tapos sasabayan mo yung
Ah,
yung
okay.
PDF.
Okay.
and you can check, in fact, in one of the Senate hearings, Senator Win Gatchalian has given a favorable feedback on how our teachers have done the organization. It's not like a lecture type, but it's more a guided conversational type. And then there are visuals that they can see. Uh, Yun nga lang, one way ang
Yeah, yeah,
interaction.
yeah.
And they are
Interaction.
speaking as though they are getting a response
Mhm,
from the
mhm,
Parang
learner.
mhm.
batibot noon.
Parang batibot.
Oo.
That's correct.
Ah,
That's
nanonood
how
ka
it.
ng batibot, ha?
There's a
Yes, that's
mistake,
how.
no?
So,
Yeah.
anyway, ang ano talaga diyan, sir, is the most important thing is na facilitate nyo ang learning continuity because otherwise, as you were said, may iwan tayo. So, what do you think, nasaan tayo in terms of competitiveness ang ating education system against our ASEAN neighbors? Where are we?
Well, that is where we said we are looking at the internal our quality, and we have acknowledged that to be the biggest challenge of education today. And masalimuot na issue ito dahil may part dito ng English proficiency.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
because kakaiba tayo sa ating mga in fact, the Philippines will be one of very few countries where the language of instruction, uh, which is for math and science, is in the English language, uh, is different from the language spoken at home.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
but that's a language policy, and it's a big policy issue whether will we change our language of instruction when that is also a source of our competitiveness. It's not just about the
mhm,
knowledge per se, but also in the proficiency of the English language. So
mhm,
it's
mhm,
a it's a it's a key area, but we are dito ko binabanggit sa addressing quality na when I at the beginning I said that we should not lose sight of the strategic challenges.
mhm,
And in relation to addressing the quality of basic education, we have launched in pre-pandemic in November 2019 a program called Sulong Edukalidad, and it has four components. One is there is an ongoing review of the curriculum as a component of that. Number two is the continued uh, uh, improvement in the learning environment through the facilities in the schools. And then the third, which is very important, is the teachers upskilling and reskilling, because we're not talking about it as capacity building, but really upskilling and reskilling, because
mhm,
the standards of quality is very dynamic. It changes at the
mhm,
global
yeah,
level.
yeah,
And what we have seen in the OECD program for International Student Assessment, or PISA.
okay.
And we are doing interventions now to align how we integrate the competencies to global standards. So that strategic program is ongoing. Uh, and in the upskilling and reskilling of teachers, I just want to note that one major program of the department is the transformation of what we call the National Educators Academy of the Philippines. That's our in-service professional development arm. It is a 1985 era unit in the Department of Education, but has not really developed to the level of the mandate that it was originally given to it, and so we are transforming it to be consistent with that, and that will result in the integration of our professional
Mm-hmm.
development program as well as its alignment to our career progression or promotion systems in the
Mm-hmm.
department. So that's a major reform that is truly an initiative of the Secretary of Education. Just one fine point also is that while we are doing professional development in service, it is also very important to address itong pre-service, yung mga teacher education preparatory to teaching in higher education institutions.
Oh.
And they have to also keep up with the changing standards of quality so that when they come to the Department of Education as new teachers, we don't have to as much burden of doing trainings in service.
Mm-hmm.
So we are addressing the strategic uh, challenges of education quality, and that has been also modified by our experience in COVID, kasi kailangan talagang pag-ibayuhin yung uh, in addressing quality ay also doing certain transformations in the delivery uh, of learning, the use of technology, and even the competencies. And one final feature, and the secretary has directed a study of the reimagination of the learning space. Kasi
Mm-hmm.
ngayon, nakita natin na yung traditional unit natin of a learning space, which is the classroom, ay hindi sapat. Kailangan ay ma-integrate natin in our conceptualization of the learning space uh, spaces outside the school. That includes the home, community spaces, as well as the virtual space ay kailangan
Yes.
kasama na sa ating conceptualization of a learning space, and that will affect investments, the kinds of resources, what technology are needed. So we're also addressing that now.
So
Right.
in the near future, yung ba mga teachers aside from this mga skills upgrading, competency levels, ano, so would they be provided with the gadgets or whatever technical support from the Department of Education? How much
Uh,
percent of the teachers are right now ready for the blended mixer?
we interviewed the no, we had the survey prior to this on the availability of gadgets and connectivity. So we have the data. I just don't have the
Yes, sir, that's
uh,
fine.
data with me immediately, but I think as many as about 65% of our teachers
Okay.
have ownership of
Mm-mm.
gadgets
Mm.
and either laptop or desktops at home.
Oo.
It might be higher than 65%, and so it's the residual that we have to address. uh, and then ang connectivity, ang marami is through the smartphones talaga.
Oo.
Walang dedicated internet at home. So but this is the matter of technology is a responsibility that is infrastructural also in nature. And so we need the support of the entire government, including the
Mm-mm.
DICT and the private sector to address this. I mean, you know that even in private setting in work, this is a major challenge. I mean,
Yes.
Mm-mm.
yung infrastructure challenge natin. And so there's a dependent component that the Department of Education cannot address by itself.
But is the
particularly
department,
in the infrastructure and technology
yeah,
side.
is the department even considering helping the parents, the students with their gadgets, or that, if only to cope up with the blended learning system?
Uh, I believe I'm just not sure, but I think well, aside from the provision of the gadgets through the help of the local government units and the ones what our resources have provided, pero and then yung whitelisting as I mentioned of the
Mm-hmm.
DepEd Commons, so they can download it na free data. Uh, I, I'm just not sure if there is an allocation from out of our allocation from the bayanihan that will be allocated for connectivity. I just can't say with definiteness, but we understand that that is an area that we have to provide support, and that is also an area where local government units have to provide support. Of course, yung direct subsidy, uh, considering we have 20 close to 27 million
22 million.
learners, hindi yan biro-biro. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
if you
yeah, yeah,
multiply that kahit pa 100 pesos, 200, 300, because of
yeah.
the the magnitude
Volume.
of the volume ay malaki ang fiscal implication. That's why it's not easy to just simply say, well, yes, we will support. Yeah.
Kasi you need a stable connectivity. Yung problem ng mga
Yeah.
students ngayon is mamimiss nila yung segment, a few minutes of the lecture kasi choppy yung signal,
Ah,
parang gano'n.
but by the way, one other challenge that I think is being transformed over time is uh, in fact cultural or behavioral, in the sense that sanay tayo in the use of gadgets not for learning purposes but for communication and entertainment, and so there needs to be a shift also in the mindset of our learners and teachers that these gadgets are educational and learning tools and not just communication and entertainment tools. So that
Precisely.
also needs to be addressed. And I'm sure you can imagine. In fact, I've seen certain forums uh, na it's the children that are assisting the
Correct.
the
The
parents
elderly.
to like for example ito
Wow.
SteamYard, etc. Ito madali sa atin, but for some usually pero yung mga bata na mas exposed na talaga, I mean in the
Dali nila
digital
ma-workout.
platform, yes, and so that's yung sinasabi kong cultural and behavioral change.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be able to adapt and really accept that these gadgets are as much a learning and educational tool as it is a communication and entertainment
Tama
platform.
po. May
So
bago
I
na
guess,
nga pong reason sa excuse sleep eh. Telco down.
Telco down.
so I guess, unless you have any more questions, John, kay Anders,
Ay,
kay
isa na
Yuse.
lang. Basically, it has to do with the field of study na requires hands-on skill, like yung mga surgeons, yung mga tech voc.
Yeah.
They
Uh,
need to be there.
Yes, in fact, we have identified itong TechVoc track that requires workshop-based as a priority for the reintroduction of face-to-face. In the
Mm-hmm.
meantime, ay may limitations tayo na walang hands-on, and so meron tayo mga batches ng TechVoc track that might not be able to take the national certification exam or
Mm.
assessment of TESDA accredited assessors because we
Puro
have to
theory lang
follow
sila.
the training regulation of TESDA that includes hands-on workshop. So you're correct in flagging that, and unfortunately, hindi tayo makapagpapunta ng mga bata even in workshop setting. In fact, the dispensation or the approval that was given are mainly for college na in the medical profession. Yung
Ayun.
medical field ang nagkaroon ng exemption recently because they don't want any interruption in the supply of the health practitioners. So that's correct. Ito yung isang impact na yung mga tech walk track natin na uh, workshop based ang training regulation might not be able to take the national certification. So there would be some remediation that will have to happen if even if they're able to graduate, let's say senior high school, but they might not be able to take the national certification. So we have to address that as a special concern.
Right. Yes.
So anyway, sir, uh, before we even you say your parting words to the parents and teachers and the students, so we don't expect face-to-face classes this year, or it's still a
Uh, it's it's it's
possibility.
it's still a possibility, but it is more looking like it will be in the context uh, of the availability of the vaccine, not necessarily that the children themselves have been vaccinated, but it has to somehow take into consideration as a context and as a factor itong rollout of the vaccine. So it's still a possibility. At yun na nga yung nabanggit ko kanina na we're working out now and getting expert inputs. And we have requested, as I mentioned, UNICEF to facilitate such expert advice from World Health Organization, for example, in addition to what we are already getting from DOH and through the IATF. So it's not yet a closed possibility to reintroduce, and we are working on that.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Sir, any word for our parents, teachers, and students out there? Final
Well,
words.
first is we have to extend on behalf of the Secretary and Department of Education to all our frontliners, and our frontliners are really our teachers, our
Mm-hmm.
school leaders at the school level, our students, and our parents. For responding positively to the policy direction of learning continuity. It is a These are challenging times, and we hope that they would continue to support us, and we hope that we can also appreciate that. It is difficult. In other words, providing education at this time is truly difficult, and we are doing our best to be able to provide that, to ensure that the mandate of the state for providing accessible quality education for all is not put to a halt by a pandemic such as COVID-19. And we are also assuring them that we are not just focused on the emergency of the day, but
Mm-hmm.
looking at this as an opportunity for more strategic transformation in the Department of Education. And we are ready to transition our uh, our findings, learnings, and recommendation even to the incoming administration in the Department
Mm-hmm.
of Education to ensure that truly our addressing the challenge of quality uh, is a continuous process until we can truly say that the constitutional mandate for providing not just any kind of education but quality education is finally a reality in the Philippines. So maraming
Thank you so
salamat
much,
for
sir.
this opportunity. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Anyway, the Talakayan platform is that we are actually uh, uh available 1 year tayo dyan, ano, 1 year tayo
Yes.
yeah.
We keep it for one
So
year.
if ever there will be clarifications on the part of the education system na pinadala sa amin sa Facebook, sir, can we refer it to you, or is it all right
Yeah,
if we
sure.
refer it to your office and then
Eh,
and
Yes, yes, certainly. That can be referred to us.
can we call on you again for some clarifications also in that regard? That if we need to have a follow through for another episode of this education system, can we
Yes,
have another
yes,
session with
of
you,
course.
sir?
Time permitting, as you have seen, we had to reset this quite a number of
Yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah. I know, sir. So,
Uh, yeah, yeah. But
but anyway,
time permitting, we will be happy to respond. Yes,
so thank you so much, sir.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
really
much.
for your time, and
yes,
we really appreciate. So please extend also our big thanks to Secretary Briones for her response to our invitation, sir. Thank you so much.
yes. Thank you. Good day to you.
Yeah. John, any
Now,